All right, guys. Hey, today we have another guest lecture here, DJ Kappa Wam, Kurt, and he will be talking a little bit his process about making some percussion and Afro beats. I'll let him introduce himself and talk about his journey.
Hey everybody, my name is DJ Kappa Wam. I've been producing for almost 15 years coming up. Um, Firstly, thank you Kako for having me on here and going through some Afro house things. Um, we'll be going over the basics of building up a percussion track, but before we get into that, a bit about my background. So I started playing music on the drums in church when I was about 7 years old properly. So got a good feel for rhythm and African rhythms specifically at a very young age. Grew up in Cape Town, South Africa, and house music was very important in as far as the cultural blueprint goes in the time that I grew up, which was in the 90s, early 90s, late 90s. So I did a bit of study 2 years ago, got my bachelor in audio production using analog and digital techniques. Um, been doing a little bit of hip hop stuff here and there. My catalog is not too big at the moment, but I have been doing this for a long time, involved with multiple projects. Partly radio DJ, part club DJ in New Zealand for about 7 years. Was a part of a hip hop collective for about 3 years, all in New Zealand. I was a part of a DJ collective as well in New Zealand, and basically all around the ballpark, really, when it comes to music, African music, all eras, European music, South American music. I just have a deep love for all things involved with the music. So let's get into this Afro house track. So one of the first things I would do is set up a sidechain bus. So I did that by going into any source of any sort of audio signal, and I've just used a percussion sound in battery. For those who don't know, you can get battery for a demo right now on the Native Instruments website. So I've just got this percussion instrument triggering the side chain, which has had no output. As you can see, it's channeled to no output. That way it's there straight away. So first you want to set up a shaker. So the shaker in Afro House is always going to determine the overall groove and feel of the track. So in here I have a shaker. Now to do this, I've clicked the sequencer menu in Logic. This is the new Logic Pro X, and I've opened up a pattern cell. So we create a pattern cell, and what it'll come up with is this over here. So I have my shaker groove in here. This is just from the drum synth in Logic, and I've messed around with the tone to get it to how I like it to sound. So if I play this for you, all right, cool. All right. So yes, in this shaker, what I've done is these velocity points is essentially what is setting the groove. So if you can see the groove in here, without the velocity, it's just your normal 16th pattern. But I've gone in and the velocity has created this rhythm here. Now when I trigger the sidechain, you should hear it coming a little bit. I don't have too much of it in this compressor here, but it's working in there. So now that I have my shaker and my sidechain, I'm kind of off to discover what comes next. So after that, I'll normally start layering some percussion. I've already created a track here, but we'll go through every single step again. And what I've essentially done with this one as well is another instance of the sequencer here within Logic. And this pattern is playing your simple, your basic African rhythm. Again, triggered with the side chain. We'll just shake it together now. So that is the basis of most Afro house tracks is you can clap it. It's a very common African rhythm. And once I've done that, so in there, these samples will be provided for everyone, by the way. After that, I'll have a good kick. So the kick has to be thumping, but not too much. So I've gone in and created this. So the kick is also kind of goes on the and. If you hear that break, that pause between. So now I have a solid foundation as far as Afro house goes. And I've gone in and just from here, before any melodic things come in, the most important thing about Afro house is percussion layering. So I'll go through and show you some of the percussion parts. So it's very simple rhythms on each track. Now I'll break this one down for everyone out there who is not familiar with polyrhythms. If I zoom in here, what we have here essentially is a triplet feel. As you can see in this quantized section here, it's quantized to 16th triplet. And what that creates is the swingy, loose African feel that complements the shakers. And altogether, so we've got a solid. We're rolling now, you know. Back home in South Africa, you can play this and for 8 minutes and you're good. But with this here right now, what I'll do after this is create a soundscape. Now, what I mean by soundscape is it's not a chord progression and it's not a melody. It's more of it acts almost as pads. So similar things that they do over with the dub techno genre, with just, you know, chords, one chord, stabs, things like that. So I've gone in here, and again, these samples will be provided for you to mess around with. Now I'm using battery to trigger my sounds. You can use any sampler. Logic's built-in sampler is great. And I've just got some chord samples in there. So this initially sets the overall texture and mood of the song. Not so much melodic things going on, just a space, a melodic space, I should say. And then I've gone in and add these weird kind of chord things, modular synthesizers, and so once you have your mood, it's very important to focus on with Afro House a feeling rather than a cool melody or an amazing chord progression. There is elements of Afro House that have that, but this particular genre I'm showing you here is the more tech side of Afro House, Afro-Tech music. So I'll play it through and you can kind of just hear. Okay, so as you can hear, we'll go back to this percussion again because it's very, very important. Ultimately, the groove is really being set by this section here. Because that's giving you that feel. So once you have a good arrangement as far as percussion goes, it's very easy to slip into different melodic things. Like when I started making this one, there was a lot of different sounds that I wanted to add, but what's very important with Afro House is simplicity. And by simplicity, I mean by really keeping the melodic things very simple. And if there's anything that needs to be progressed through an Afro House track is percussion, heavy emphasis on percussion. So what I'll go on to do with this track is I'll add more percussion. It's finished now. As far as the sounds go, but I'll go through and add more percussion and more solos, conga solos, djembe solos to really fill up the track. But because we're just going on the simple side of things, I thought I'll break this down a little bit. So this sound right here, the next sound I'm going to introduce is a vocal, which I processed through the Loop Cloud plugin, which is the Loop Masters version of Splice, if you want to call it that. They've got a free trial, which will give you 100 sounds. I've used this sound to come up with this. So this just acts as a moving sound that makes the track sound like it's going somewhere when really it's just keeping you in the same mode. And if I layer that with the and after that I added up some keys, just some keys to kind of layer the chord there. Just this chord there to kind of accompany everything together. And that's the whole journey of the track. And what I'll do with this sound is, at this point I'll kind of just mess around with some delay ideas. So I'll go through and add Logic tape delay. And that's basically the first phase of creating a great Afro House track. A lot of movement with effects, like I'm doing with this delay here. So what I'll do with that is I'll open up a new track and I'll bus it out to a recording bus. And in the audio field, this is very illegal what I'm doing. so to speak. The practice is not really something you'd want to do. But for example's sake, if I have EQ'd it, compressed it, once I'm done with that side of things, I will then bus it out and record a wet bus mix, which has delay, sometimes reverb, and just different sounds that are modulating, a phaser modulating itself, flange modulating itself. This is just kind of how I like to work with things. So I'll press Option and click on the bus fader here to bust that sound out. And I will go through and just start messing around and seeing what ideas I can come up with. So as you can see here on the top section, I've got a very long, let's see where the time is now for the song. So we're on 2 minutes. I like to work this way where I do a 2-minute section and I will loop that section out with the same sounds, but remodulate that again to build some more of a journey, because Afro House is a very progressive genre. It's not something that has a big drop, or let's say a instrumental section or a vocal section. There's a lot of vocals involved with Afro House for sure. But this side of the instrumental side, the Afro-Tech, most songs would go to about 6 minutes, 8 minutes, some of them. And so I'll record out this effects section here, this delay on these modulated chords. So I'll get a nice section there that I can work with. So now I know I don't need that. I'll keep the MIDI file in case I wanted to change things. So I'll loop that out. And that's kind of going to set a movement there as well. Now I won't go into arranging just as yet. But this is basically how the Afro House track starts. And the time will vary because your main focus, I think, going into making an Afro House track is I'm going to say it again, is the percussion. So there's not a lot going on. But it's very full. So at this point, if I got my moving sounds, my modulating effects going through the sounds I want to move. And what I'll do at this point is kind of solo the percussion, and I'll start doing some mixing things. So I'll start establishing where I want each part to play. So because this is a low sound, I know I'm just going to keep that very well centered. And with this one, I might pan that one a little bit to the right. And this one here, I might pan a little bit to the left. And with the shaker, great thing that I like to do with shakers is add a little bit of chorus. Not too much. So about 9%, 50% intensity at about 800 Hertz. So now I know my percussion's moving in both directions and my melodic pieces will just and at this point I'll start EQing my melodic parts. I'll also add the sidechain. So next, obviously, as you can hear it coming in there, is the bass sound. Now again, this is not some complex bass line I'm working with here. It's a very, very simple bass line. It's really not a bass line. It's just a sub pulse. So as far as bass lines go, that's probably the most simple one you will probably ever come across. But like I said, the movement of Afro House is essentially with the percussion, a strong, simple low end that can hold a groove with nothing too complex, and modulated movements, automated movements. Mess around a lot with LFOs. That's at a later stage, the more advanced side of things. But that's basically the bass that'll complement the kick. And I'll go through and just, make sure the EQ is where I want it to be. So at 60, I like to boost about +2, around 60 Hertz. And now that I have kind of all the sounds that I'm working with, I'll start going through and I will start doing some small mixing before I will get into the actual mixing session. I'll do a little bit of mixing to bounce the sounds out into a new session where I'll start the gain staging process in that field of the whole production. So basically, once you have your melodic sounds, your melodic soundscape, a solid percussion groove, very important steps, shakers to follow the movement, your skin drums, your djembes, your congas, your bongos, your timbales, whatever sets a shoulder movement, as we call it in Africa. Anything that starts getting the shoulders moving is what you want to start working on. And from there, you want to get a solid kick. And from that point, you want to start bringing in small melodic textures. I'll break down how I did this one here. So essentially, I've just added a textural sound, like some vinyl noise or some tape noise, tape hiss. And I've gone in and played a chord on, I think it was a Turia, a pad sound, and did some sound designing there. Again, a lesson that we might break down later on, creating your own sort of samples to use in these tracks, which is very important as far as coming up with something unique in the realms that you want to as a producer, it's very important to establish your workflow. So once you have your workflow associated with different genres, you'll find it a bit easier to create different forms of dance music. And Afro House is definitely one that gets the people moving in certain realms and in certain places of the world. So it's been a pleasure breaking down this one. We'll go into further detail on each different sections. I'll break down the sequencing side. I'll go a bit deeper into the percussion side again. And all these samples will be available for you to use and to put in your samplers and your different doors. And let's continue on and discover how we can get you to make some great Afro house music.